5 children, except only 4 are here right now. Let's start off with our first question. Do you feel overall adoption had positively or negatively impacted the family? How did it positively or negatively, and why? So let's throw the discussion open.
Me? Okay. I would say at this point in my life, I would say positively impacted the family.
Okay, why?
Anyone want to elaborate from there?
So why would you say it positively impacted?
Because I think where I am in life, I wouldn't be where I would have been if we didn't.
Okay, so what were the events that we would say would lead up to a positive experience? Can you give some examples?
I think there's been a lot of experiences with each adoption that has had its challenges as well as its benefits and helped around us as people. And some of us have chosen professions specifically in those fields because of the kids we've adopted.
So what professions are you thinking, and what do you have in mind right now?
2 of us are trained as occupational physical therapist assistants after the kids went to OT and PT themselves.
And you work with brain
Injury
rehabilitation, and I work in the hospital setting with rehabilitation as well.
Which we probably wouldn't have known about if we didn't adopt.
Cool.
I fix airplanes, are simpler than people.
And I fix cars, they're more complex than airplanes, but no. But I don't think you can directly say is it positively or negatively affected. What I can say is that I think we are all in a good place in our life, and it's shaped us to who we are, which I think is a good place. But we can't necessarily say what would have happened if there was only 5 of us.
Yeah, we don't know how we would have been.
Well, that's it. I mean, and most of us were fairly young at the time. It's hard to say what life would have been like had we not adopted, right? Like,
I think
most of us can't even remember most of the adoptions. I can remember the majority of them, but at the same time, like, what would life have been like without adopting? It's hard to say. We don't know. But I think we're all
Generally happy.
Yeah, we're generally happy. We're well-rounded people. We've had a good upbringing. We're all successful, I would say.
We've all learned a ton of patience over the years.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us would have been very naive to disability and understanding, and we wouldn't have understood as much about people with disabilities as we do now.
And I like to think that the kids we've adopted have come into a better reality than they were before.
Yes.
Some of them went through quite a bit of challenges before they came to us.
And
not to say there wasn't challenges when they came to us as well, but
I think having multiple adoptions is good too, in the way that they saw they weren't the only ones adopted into the family. There was multiples adopted in.
well, the fact that they all think all of us are adopted. Well, they think I'm adopted anyway.
So I think that helps them in the way that they weren't the only ones brought into the family. There was a few of them.
Yeah,
Well, more than a few of them.
They didn't have to feel different,
Yeah.
which
There's more adopted than not, so we're the weird ones.
You at least.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get on to the next question here. Keep in mind that we're going to be talking with the adoptive children, as many of them as we can get together, for their perspective as well on these. So they'll get different questions, but some will be the same. And this next question here is one that will probably be thrown to them as well. So, do you feel adoption was the right decision for the children that joined your family?
I'd say absolutely. All of them came from very difficult situations. Obviously, they wouldn't be in the foster care system had they not been. All of them were removed from their previous families as opposed to being orphaned or something to that extent. Mm-hmm. And they were removed for a reason. So I think pretty well any situation would have been better for a lot of them, but I think they were brought into a good family, and
Well, I think one of the earlier adoptions, it was a difficult situation, and I don't know that there would have been the perfect place for them with the amount of abuse and other things that went on in that foster home and their previous life. That although I think our family was a better option for them, that one presented a lot of challenges.
And I think not just the challenge, like them coming into our family. I think if you look at the changes that they've had with mental health, physical health with some of them, and just general happiness, they've all changed a lot from where they were. So in that aspect of things, I think they've all, if you're happy, that's a better way of life.
Yeah, I think they're better taken care of. Obviously, they were pulled up because they were being taken care of in an adequate way. So I think adoption was really the only choice for most of them that, or foster care till they age out of the system, which isn't a great option. So
It's not really an option. A lot of them end up on the streets of that.
Well,
Yes.
even with some of the ones that came to our family were said that they will never have the ability to think on their own. And after spending time in a nurturing environment, that has been proved wrong.
well, I
Or
think
they
that
are
also
able
comes from
to.
naiveness and not understanding disability from the people saying that.
Well, of course, but
Yeah.
A lot of that came from the doctors too, though.
it did.
And maybe they just didn't give them the interest that they should have, and they're in a better medical care situation now than they were before.
They
but
have a good team of doctors.
exactly, they've got a very good team. Oh,
Well, not just doctors, professionals in general.
Yeah.
yeah,
Doctors, physios, OTs, PTs, speech,
And
neurologists, family, everything.
it's all support that they wouldn't have had in their previous situation because somebody didn't take that deep interest in them.
Yeah.
And that's something that has benefited them in every way.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we need to emphasize when talking about all the kids we've adopted, that these kids are all considered hard to place children, that they all have significant disabilities, and that does make it different than other adoptions, and that in a lot of cases for these children that are considered hard to place, a lot of them don't get adopted, and a lot of them don't get that care that they need. So I do think that it really benefited the kids that we adopted, that there was somebody to not only take care of children with special needs, but children that have siblings that are also in the foster care system to be adopted together.
Yeah, especially multiple child adoptions where there's more than one sibling in the group. They're hard to find families because a lot of people, when they're adopting, look for one kid, not 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kids. And they usually get separated and don't know their siblings from there. So I think it benefited them that they were able to stay together.
Even things like openness, like we've always tried to be open with the biological families, and I think that has a huge part to play as well. Obviously, you never want to shut those families out if it's at all possible, right? So
And the siblings got the option to bring us to meet their biological families too, so that everyone got to know each other. So it wasn't just them going to meet their biological parents. There was the rest of their siblings meeting them too, if that's what they chose.
So let me make this more personal for you guys. How did adoption change you as an individual?
I think that's kind of a tough question to answer in a lot of ways because a lot of us were very young. Like the first adoption, I think I was probably 10 or 11 at the time,
Well,
if
I
I
was
remember
You were
right.
12, I was 8.
Yeah, so I mean,
I was 4 turning 5.
yeah, it's kind of hard to remember back the way you were before to say how you're different now, right? Like, how did you get to where you've been having not known where you were at previously? You know what I mean? I think we're all, like I said before, well-rounded individuals. We've all got professional careers. We're all fairly successful, I would say. And I mean, two of you have drawn inspiration from what you've seen these kids going through, and you've built your careers around that, which is great. But like I said, it's hard to say how much it's changed you, aside from the fact that we've all done well.
I was going to say, for me, I don't think I would live where I live right now. I wouldn't have gone to the school I went to. I wouldn't have the job I have. None of that as it came from
Well, as far as you know.
Yeah, as far as I know, I don't think I would have known much about OT and PT, and I wouldn't have gone into that career. I don't think, had we not adopted them and had we not seen what OTs and PTs do.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think part of me has stayed the same. I think I've always wanted to help people, that's always been important to me. But adopting these different kids has helped me see what paths are available for that, and whether or not I would have learned that without adopting them, you can't say. I think each adoption has taught me something different. Each child that we've adopted, each sibling of ours, has shown us something different that we can learn from. And yeah, help to round us out.
I think in a way, a lot of us grew up faster as taking a role of helping take care of these kids and helping them understand the world. So I think that's one thing, we grew up quicker than maybe we would have, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think, but I think we all kind of stepped up to the plate and matured faster than typical people our age.
Yeah, I feel that, like you said, all of us did become mature at quite a young age, where that comes from having to be kind of like an older sibling to your older siblings in a way, and to your younger siblings, where you might not get that in other circumstances in life. And I do feel that's a good thing, in the most part, that we all did rise to the occasion. We were all there, and as a more of a person that they looked up to, I like to think. And I think that helped us with leadership throughout many different aspects of life, and that brought us to where we are today.
Yeah, well, and I think about just the different ages we are compared to the different kids in the family. We have some that are really young in comparison to us, and some of them see us not necessarily as a sibling role, but more of, not a parent, but a babysitter, a caretaker. Like, a lot of us see us as that, and I've had a lot of the younger ones get confused as to what my relationship is to them.
Compared to the relationship of their actual caretakers, their support workers and stuff.
Yeah. I've been called a babysitter, a teacher,
a worker.
A worker. I've been called mom, but I mean, that's
the confusion.
Yeah, it's a little bit of confusion, but they are confused at times because there's such an age difference, and our roles in their lives have been so different because we've moved out. We're grown-ups now, and we're coming back in to visit them, and still having to instruct them on what they need to be doing at times, and still trying to be that fun-loving sibling, but it doesn't always come across that way.
Well, especially when you consider that the last two adoptions, some of us weren't even living at home at the time. So it's hard to see us as a sibling from their perspective when
you don't grow up with them.
We didn't grow up with them. We're that much older, and I mean, some of us are having kids of our own now too, right? And those kids are interacting with our siblings as friends, as opposed to
almost like a
aunts
cousin.
and uncles.
Yeah, almost like a cousin
So,
relationship.
Yeah, I think it is probably a little bit confusing for them, but I think that they're all better off for it, I would say, for sure.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I would say that the whole experience has definitely made us all more tolerant and understanding of those with special needs.
I wouldn't even limit it to those with special needs. I think we're all more tolerant and understanding
Of people.
of people in all walks and aspects of life.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you the next question. Do you feel you were included in the decision to adopt?
I feel we were included, well, I'll bring us back to the first one, as much as a 6, 8, 4-year-old could be included. It was brought to us, it was asked, but at that age you don't know what you're asking for, but we did enjoy it. We liked what we had done, so on the next ones, when we were asked again, it was, well, yeah, of course. That's the only thing that makes sense.
I think for me, I was 4. You can't explain to a 4-year-old that you're getting a new sibling that's older than you. That just doesn't make sense to a 4-year-old. There's no way to put it. It won't make sense. And I'll be honest, I thought I got them as my 5th birthday present because they came right around my birthday. And I thought it was just a cool birthday present I got turning 5 years old. So I really didn't understand what was happening, but it was asked, and you can't explain that to a 4-year-old.
Well, it wasn't just your 5th birthday. They pretty well that time of the year.
It was that
every
time of year
for
for-
you.
I got the coolest presents.
Yeah, I mean, especially being the oldest, like I got a bit of a different perspective, I think. We all were included, as, like you say, as much as we could have been for our age and our maturity level at the time. We would have family meetings, we talk about it, we discuss the kids, we did visitations back and forth.
There was the videos back
Yeah,
and forth.
yeah, we made lots of videos, sort of interviewing ourselves that we could send to the kids to sort of let them get to know us, and they would send videos back. Because some of the adoptions were over fairly long distances. Like the furthest one away was almost at the other end of the province, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to just drive there in an hour and get to know these kids, right? So we would have family meetings and we'd talk about it, and the social workers would come and they did their home studies and they'd interview us. And as much as we possibly could be involved in the decision-making process, I think we were. It was always very important to me to be the oldest in the family, and that was something that was always respected. We considered a potential adoption of somebody who would have been older than me at the time, and that wasn't something that I was really comfortable with at the time, and that was respected. So we didn't pursue that adoption any further. There may have been other reasons why it wasn't pursued that I'm not aware of, because we were all young at the time, but from my perspective, that was enough for me at the time. I felt like I was included in the decision-making process.
Yeah, and going from that, we did talk about this, again, as much as we could at that age to understand what was going on. And you being the oldest, you remember more of what these meetings and stuff were like. But I do remember how much our roles changed, and I think that's something else that we can talk about. As we adopted each group, you were always the oldest, but the rest of us, we ended up getting older and younger siblings. For
I'm
you,
no longer the youngest.
you still have that personality. But you were the youngest, and then we just kept getting younger kids and younger kids, and even for those adopted kids, especially being the youngest and constantly, I think that being the youngest and the oldest is probably the most challenging, to have that role taken away from you.
Yeah, losing being the youngest.
I was always very happy that I was the oldest girl, and that was important to me. I don't know that I ever voiced that growing up, but I was happy that I was always the oldest girl. So I know that was important to me, and that remained that way.
And one thing is, the adoptions, the social workers make sure the kids in the home are wanting more kids in the home. I remember social workers without mom and dad there, that any siblings sit down one-on-one, are you okay with adopting more kids? Do you want to? And so they were making sure it wasn't, that we were part of it and that we were talked to as well.
And our social workers were really good. The one in particular that handled, especially the first adoption, we still have contact with her through other organizations now. But she was really good. She was excellent with all of us, from what I remember. And she really did help to make sure that we were all included in the process.
Yeah.
Okay, that actually leads me into my next question here, and I'm going to actually combine a couple of questions. Because it's important when you talk about the social worker, it wasn't just myself and your mother that helped prepare you for the addition of children to the family, but the social workers were also a big part of that. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, just a short perspective of how you were prepared for the addition of children to the family, and do you think anything else could have been done to better prepare you for adoption?
I think a lot of it was explained to us. I remember some of it still being difficult when it came to the different adoptions. I remember how much attention each adoption took from our parents, and I remember understanding that that those kids needed that attention at that time and needed kind of that support coming into a new place and how scary it was going to be for them. But I do remember being upset that some of that attention wasn't on us, even though it was just a short period of time while we were welcoming those kids into the family. I remember understanding it, and I remember having talked about it with you guys, but still having those feelings that I was upset that I was being left out. But I'm also kind of dramatic, so that could be that.
I also think what was done well is we had our special days. One kid, one parent, one-on-one time to do something the kid enjoyed, whoever it was, and we each got a turn doing that, and that meant a lot to me. I know going out one-on-one, no other kids, whether it be biological or not, one person, and you went out and spent time with mom and dad. I mean, that was really big for me.
Yeah, and I don't think, like, as much preparation as we had, I don't think, like, there's always going to be something that's different.
Yeah.
There is nothing that's going to say it's going to be 100% prepared with any aspect on anything in life, especially not welcoming 2 or 4 or 3 more kids into the family at the same time. There's going to be difficulties, there are going to be challenges, but it's how you rise to those challenges that is the biggest thing for it.
I think it's hard to really prepare that in any sense. Like, I can remember even before adoption, when the youngest of our biological siblings was born, one of us in particular was quite devastated that there was somebody else joining the family. And as much as you can try to prepare for that, it's kind of tough, right? Things are going to change.
Yeah.
And it's how you deal with those changes and how you're flexible with it. And we were all really young at the time. So, like, it's hard to say how well prepared we really were. I'd like to think we were. I think we dealt with it well. But it is hard to prepare yourself for an addition to the family in any capacity.
And each one of them was so different from one another that they all presented different challenges that you can't prepare for those at all.
And I think
that goes whether it's an adoption or not.
one thing that I thought, we did most of our adoptions in the summer. I think all but one happened in the summer, and we were gone at summer camp because we were in cadets, and that's what we did. I would have liked to have, there was one sibling group we didn't meet before they came. We had seen pictures, we'd seen videos, but we didn't meet them, and because we were at summer camp, and in that way I would have liked to have met them beforehand, face to face. One thing that I think I would have liked to be better prepared for was learning how to make bottles, change diapers, what a soother was, because I remember one being plopped in my arms and told to make a bottle for, and I said, well, what? And it was a very hectic day as they came home, but to be fair, we didn't know at that age that they were still using bottles, they were still in diapers and stuff, so it wasn't 100% expected that we would have to know that. So in that way,
well, that just goes to show how different each one of them were, and of course we were different ages. For that group specifically, we were quite a bit older than the first few adoptions.
And some of us were moved out at that time.
yeah.
I wasn't there that summer. I didn't meet them until the very end of August. And so they had settled in a little bit before I got there.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you, this may be a bit of a touchy area for you guys. Some placements that we did with children were easier than others. And for various reasons in that. So the question I'm going to pose to you is, what made for an easier placement in your view? What made it easier?
Getting to know them before.
Well, I can think of one adoption specifically that the kids were prepared by their foster parents ahead of time. And I think that was really important because a lot of the other kids we've adopted didn't get that experience. Right from the beginning, they were told that they were going to be adopted and that they were going to meet a new family and they were going to live with that new family. Whereas some of the other ones, that wasn't explained to them and they felt like they were being passed from home to home. They didn't really know whether or not we were a forever home, no matter how many times we told them that. And then some of them were too young to even understand what that meant. And for them, it was easier too. I mean, it was still a transition and overwhelming because they're now in this new home with new people around, a lot more people around than they had before. And then some of the harder adoptions, like I said, they didn't get that explanation, and they were a bit older when they came to us, and they were able to understand that this wasn't what they were used to, that this was different, and it was difficult.
And one thing I would say, in the long run, to make it easier, that we did, but I didn't understand when we had adopted them. I was still really young for a lot of them. But family rules, implementing them right away. Don't draw it out. Don't wait to implement the rules till later, because that won't make sense to them. This wasn't a rule when I got here. Why is it a rule now? And even though they've gone through some hard times coming, I think family rules got to start right when they walk in the door. Because if you wait and, oh, this is a rule now, when it wasn't when they first got there, I think that was a good thing we did when they came in the home. Was rules started the second you walked in the door, and you followed the rules, and that way it wasn't drawn out. It wasn't a hard year of new rules. It was all at once, and it was over with within a month. They understood the rules. It was good to go.
And to go along with the rules is every single person has a task, and everybody did a different thing, whether it be clean a room, set the table, like clean the living room, set the table, unload the dishwasher, suited to their ability. Everybody had a task no matter what. And I think that showed a sense of equality and camaraderie amongst the group, that everybody was equal. There's no one person that doesn't have to do something, everybody does it. And when production starts slacking, then there's chocolates for bribery.
I think the biggest factor in whether the adoptions were easier or had more challenges was the children themselves, right? Like, they're all so different, and just like we're all different. So some of them had more challenges than others. They came from different backgrounds, and that was a challenge. And I don't think that's something you can really prepare for, aside from getting to know them better beforehand. But some of the adoptions were fairly abrupt. They were placed quicker than the social workers had anticipated because they were having issues in their foster homes. And that's, like I said, it's something that's really hard to prepare for, because you're not preparing for a situation, you're preparing for a person. These are all people, and they're all different. So it can be difficult in that regard, but you just have to work through it, and like I said, get to know them and know their circumstances and know their personality, and tailor to their needs as opposed to your own.
And I would say something that's important is a lot of kids who are coming through from foster homes, they've been through a lot. Sympathize with them, but don't pity them. Don't treat them differently than the kids that are already in your home because they've had it easier. It's not easy for a kid to have another kid come in, whether it's your biological mom having another kid or adopting. It's not easy, and so don't treat them differently because they've had a rough background, but sympathize with them because it has been hard, but don't pity what they've been through.
And going back to things that would make things easier, I know we didn't do this for every sibling group that we adopted, but some of us kids that were already living at home got to meet some of the kids in meetings before the actual adoption took place. So us older ones, the oldest male and the oldest female, we got to go and meet two of the kids before we adopted them and get to know them, and they got to know us beforehand, and it was kind of nice that we could build a bit of a relationship before coming into the family. And we come from such a large family, I think that it really makes a difference being able to have, like, especially for the kids that we're adopting, to meet smaller groups of us at a time before throwing in I can just think of bringing friends over and how overwhelmed they are, and I'm sure your wife, it was the same thing, very overwhelming coming into such a large family, that getting to know small groups first can make a big difference, and then at least you have a bit of a rapport with different people before coming into such a big situation.
Even a family of 5 kids is a fairly big family by today's standards, right? So having a familiar face that you can interact with when you get into that situation does help. And I can't even imagine coming into a family of 11 or more, right? Like I'm sure it could be overwhelming. So like you say, having that familiar face that you can kind of go to, and it definitely helps.
Okay, so I've got down to the last couple of questions here, and I'm from what you've had, because you guys have had a glance of what kind of the questions were going to be looking like, so you could think about it a little bit over the last couple of days here. I'm going to switch a couple questions around. So second to last question, this is more aimed towards educating prospective adoptive parents, so people that are looking to adopt children. Maybe they're looking, at some time in the future, a year or 2 down the road. Maybe they're in the process right now, have their application in approved, and they're just waiting for a placement. Maybe they're actually in the middle of placement. So do you have any suggestions or recommendations for parents on how they could best support their existing children when adopting?
Well, I think it's really important to acknowledge that when you're bringing in another child or multiple children into a family, that it's not just the parents that are adopting those kids, it's the siblings adopting them too. That they're becoming a family, and that it does need to be talked about. You have to acknowledge the feelings of the children in the family, and it doesn't matter if it's your first adoption or your 5th adoption. I think it needs to be a conversation each time about the kids that you're bringing in.
Especially with older kids. I mean, when you're adopting an infant or even a toddler, yeah, they've got their own personality, but it's not as well defined as somebody who's older, right? And it changes the whole dynamic of the family, and that's something that visitation is very important before placement.
Yep.
You got to get to know them, so you know what to expect as you're going forward. Like you had said, not realizing as one of the kids that there's going to be diapers and bottles. You expect that you're adopting an older child, and that's not going to be an issue. But with some of the challenges that some of the ones we've adopted have had, where somebody without those challenges wouldn't be in a diaper still, or wouldn't still have a bottle, that was a reality for us. And that's something that the existing family members need to understand and recognize before the final placement actually happens, so it's not a surprise.
Do you have anything else to add, any of you, before we get to our final question?
I was going to say suggestion for the parents, not specifically for your other kids, but in general with adopting. Know your limits for sure. Can't save every kid in the world, but it's definitely a good idea to help the ones you can, and there's a lot out there that need help, but know your limits, I would say.
And understand what's going to happen in the future too. I think that's a big part of it, is if you adopt a child with special needs, for example, that might be a child that's with you forever, and you got to think about those things. And every member of the family needs to understand that.
Yeah, as the parents, they could live with you till they're 50. With disabilities, there may not be a time of moving out, of going to college, that kind of stuff, and you got to realize when they're 5 that's, or an infant, or however old they are, that's a possibility, and you need to be prepared that that's what your life is coming.
Still understand that those kids are still amazing kids.
They can be very helpful, very productive.
Yeah, wonderful people, and you'll love them no matter what, but it is something that you do have to understand, that it isn't until they're adults. That's not when your job's over. and that's whether you have special needs or not. I still rely on mom and dad all the time.
In any person, there's a physical age and a mental age, and those don't always line up as the same. There's nothing wrong with that, but they may physically be 20 years old, but if mentally they're still thinking like a 12-year-old, they're not ready to move out at that time, and they will be with you, and that's okay. And like even with a 5 or 6-year-old, they could be functioning as a 2 or 3-year-old, still in the diapers, still in bottles. There's nothing wrong with that, but it is something just to know.
And at that time, with a 5-year-old, maybe mentally they're functioning at a 3-4-year-old, it may seem cute because they're little. But keep in mind that may not be cute when they're 20 and still functioning at a 5-year-old. You still have to expect, even though they're mentally functioning lower, I would say you still have to have that expectation of their chronological age in the way they act in certain ways.
Well, I think an important thing, like I think the best thing you could do to understand these things more is talk to families that have experienced the same thing. You can read as many books as you want. You're not going to get a full picture of what it's like. And like we said all throughout this video, each child is different that you adopt. Everyone's going to be different. They're going to have a different story. But if you can talk to somebody that has a similar experience, similar adoption, I mean, that's the reason we're doing this video, is so that people can learn more about what it's like. But it is important, and I think that's something that you can do to help prepare yourself, is talk to somebody else that's done it. The adoption community is huge.
And feel free to comment on the videos, ask questions on there if that's what you feel, or however you want to. We're open to questions.
And you can also talk to the foster family themselves, like to see how those kids are and what are their challenges that they've found, not necessarily what you've seen in your visits.
Yeah.
I would also say it's important to check back in with the other family members throughout the process, through the visitations and even after placement. I mean, throughout the visitations and everything else, nothing's too late until the placement has happened, right? Talk to the family, talk to everybody, and just make sure things are going okay. Make sure they're still comfortable with the idea. Now that they've gotten to know the prospective children a little bit better, maybe they're not okay with it. Nothing's too late until it's signed and delivered, right? And especially even after placement, check back in with them, see if there's anything you can do to help. It can be a difficult process, it can be an easy process. It all depends on the personality of everybody involved.
And be open to what they say without judgment, and so that they don't feel like they're a bad person if they don't think that something's going right.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be lots of challenges with anything similar to this, and it is important that they feel comfortable being able to come forward and say how they truly feel.
Okay, so let's go on to the final question here. And I would like you to be, and I'm going to read it out verbatim the way that your mother and I have written this out. Please be honest answering this next question. We will not be offended. If you think we could have done things better, then what should we have done?
In my opinion, with the family talks and stuff, I feel like in the first adoption we were all asked as a group, are you okay with this? I think if more emphasis was put on specific kids alone in a more relaxed environment of their thoughts, what's their opinions of things, I think that would have helped a lot more with everybody.
Rather than a big group setting.
Rather than a group setting,
A meeting.
because
like,
people can sit back and fall back in the group.
Yeah. And for young children, right, I don't remember it, but I would say don't make it so much a meeting, but try and make it more casual conversation. You know, for someone who's really young, maybe you're at the park and talk to them in more of an open way where they're feeling relaxed and not like they're sitting at the kitchen table. Not that we did that, I don't remember, but I would say it would be very important to have it in a relaxed setting that the kid feels more comfortable in rather than like they're at the table.
One thing, when I think about the adoptions that we've had, now that we're older, I mean, I was moved out for the last group that we adopted, And although it was still talked about with us, I don't think it was talked about quite as heavily as it did with the ones when we were younger. And I think that as adults, I think our opinions should be just as important as they were when we were still living at home. And that we do have a lot of input and we have a new perspective because we grew up with kids that we've adopted. And even though we're not living at home, we're still a huge part of the family. We still try to come home as often as possible. We visit lots and we still try to be the best siblings we can be to the kids that are at home. And I think that we need to acknowledge everybody's thoughts still and their opinions and respect those thoughts and opinions.
Okay, is there anything else that anyone would like to add? This is your time now to throw in anything else. So it's an open forum until you guys are done, and then we will shut the video off. What do you guys think? Because there was a sibling of yours that had to work late and unfortunately couldn't be here. Of me running through some of these questions with him and adding his voice in the middle of this. Do you think we should?
You can try it. It might be a little awkward.
It might be a little awkward. Okay. Go ahead. Let's. Anything else?
He
you want
tends to be a little sarcastic too. So.
I think we all do. I think it is important to just kind of wrap it all into one and say that overall this has been a good experience. And yeah, some of the stuff we've said, we've presented some of the challenges that we've had through the adoptions, but overall it was a good experience. I know me personally, I'm sure all of you guys feel the same way. We love every one of our siblings. We care about them, we want the best for them, and we want to be a big part of their lives, no matter where they are, whether they're still living at home or if they're living on their own, that they are our siblings. It doesn't matter if we're biologically related. We chose to have them in our family, and
never expect it to go smooth. There will never be 100% smooth adoption. It doesn't happen. Don't be surprised, but it will still be.
But at the end of the day,
it's positive at the end.
Yeah, it's still a positive
We have a
experience.
smooth running family, I would say.
Well, as we said at the beginning, it made us who we are today, and we feel we are all ahead in life.
I'm a pretty good person.
And I mean, I honestly can't imagine life without any of them any more than I could without any of the ones in the room, right? Like, they truly are totally integrated into the family. They're no different than the four of us sitting here. And like I said, life without them isn't something that I could picture because they are part of the family.
Yeah, they're siblings.
One thing our family chose to do, which you may observe watching the other videos that are on this link, we chose to adopt all Caucasian children, and that's because we come from a very Caucasian community, and it doesn't stand out on who was adopted and who wasn't. It's not because we're racist. We're very welcoming to every race, but you can't say that one's adopted, they're a different color. You can't, looking at us, we all look completely different, but you can't tell who was adopted and who wasn't.
And for some of the kids we've adopted, that's been really important to them. I know one of our sisters, who she basically gets called a mini version of me by some of the neighbors. She absolutely loves that she looks like me, that she feels like she's no different, and she isn't. Yeah, she came to us a little bit later in life, but they're no different than the rest of us. We're all family.
And I mean, you've even been mistaken as a twin before.
Yeah, well.
So have I,
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah.
And the two of our brothers as well have been mistaken as twins as well. So
Yeah, even though we're not blood related, you can't tell who's adopted, who's biological, and that's the way we hoped it would go.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I know it's been a challenge to get at least most of you together. I know the youngest one in the room here has driven well over 1,000 kilometers to get here.
37 hours.
37 hours. Yeah, you were visiting a different province past where you actually live. And then one driving down a couple hundred kilometers as well. So I appreciate everybody, all the effort put in to get here tonight to be able to put this together so that we can share with everybody online. So thank you once again.
And please like, comment, and subscribe.
There you go.